And the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Hello and welcome to the only independent news and opinion program where we chronicle two distinct possibilities, either the demise and possible extinction of the Homo sapien or the greatest leap forward in all of human history. One thing is certain, there is no status quo. This is the Daily Australian Radio Show, episode number 49 for Thursday, March 13th, 2025. I am one of your hosts, Jason Olborn, and I'm going to introduce you to the other star herself, Nicola Charles. Welcome back.
Oh, morning, Jason. Morning, listeners. Less of the star stuff. I think my star has actually fallen quite substantially, Jason, but thank you. We're on the eve of our 50th birthday. That's a big milestone. And I did say yesterday, didn't I, that it's one day closer to the weekend, and here we are again. It's Thursday. So for those of you out there slaving, I know we're all slaving right now to put food on the table. Well done, you. The weekend is almost here. I think the weather's going to be quite nice, and we should all be looking forward to it, Jason.
Oh, goodness me, a weekend. What is that? Tell you what, in between sporting seasons, it's this little lull after cricket and before soccer and netball. I feel like, yeah, we can have that little bit of a sleep in on Saturday morning if we're lucky enough to get one.
Yeah, this Saturday I've worked out is probably going to be my last Saturday off for about a year because of the job I'm doing. And I'm like, gee, what am I going to do with that Saturday? I'm completely flummoxed now. Now, I did a little clip on my X account this morning. My X account is at All Bite No Bark 88. Jason's is Jason Q Citizen 1. About something one of our wonderful listeners, a brilliant citizen journalist, sent to me. And I was absolutely flabbergasted because, like everyone else, I thought, well, that can't be true. That can't be true. That can't be true. Turns out it is true. And I'm just going to quickly state what it is. In 1939, the Cancer Act was passed in Parliament in England and was then applied in America. Under the 1939 Cancer Act, it is actually a criminal offence for medical practitioners to even advise patients on potential cancer cures. This raises the question, wouldn't it therefore be considered fraudulent for cancer charities to accept donations under the assumption that they are searching for a cure, which is actually a criminal act for them to publicise such cures? This act is still in effect today, and medical practitioners have been prosecuted for attempting to cure cancer. And in England, some have even been jailed for doing so. I cannot believe this, Jason, but it is true. And this is just more of this stuff that's been hidden from us. I mean, in the UK, I've raised money for them by running in half marathons. Cancer UK is Cancer Research UK is so huge. I also ran for Leukemia Research UK, so also cancer, blood cancer. So now we find out that even if they found the cure, which they likely did, because when you find the cure for something, you also know how to cause it. And what do we see? An explosion of cancer. Even if they found the cure, they're not allowed to tell us. So what the hell is going on, Jason?
I am confused. I feel like I'm living in bizarro world today.
Yeah.
It just nothing makes sense anymore. And despite the fact that we have developed this show to try and make sense of what's going on as we charter two distinct, possibilities, as we say in the opening here. So hang on a second. You're not allowed to promote a cancer cure, even if it cures cancer, and it's proven to do so.
That's right. And people who've done that in the UK, in England, have been jailed. So, I always feel it makes me quite emotional. You see a lot of people in cars. I see a lot of youths actually with this, and they've got that big sticker across the front and it says, F cancer. And, cancer is the bad guy and cancer gets the blame. And of course, cancer is terrible and awful. And for those of us who've lost family members to cancer, and I've lost multiple, and I'm sure most people have, that's absolutely how we feel. But then when you find out the mechanism behind this, the people that could have been saved, the things we didn't know about this research. I mean, again, I think we mentioned the other day about this charity stuff being the biggest money spinner on the planet, and cancer has to be the biggest, surely. Of course, there was AIDS and there was cancer. I just feel like we've been defrauded with everything from, cancer charities, AIDS charities, even doing like the national lottery. I feel like it's all a lie. I feel like we're in this terrible big scam. And it's just horrifying and disappointing. And I have to ask myself, why would they have allowed us to suddenly find out all this stuff? I find it strange that we're allowed to find out. Now, I would like to say that someone has had a little crack at me on Substack, and they've said that I go on about AI and that it's basically Y2K, Jason. And we shouldn't be afraid of AI because it is still a computer program. It is just regurgitating facts. And it's actually not as sentient as some pundits are saying. And this is all being used as a control measure, which I actually do take on board because that makes sense to me.
Well, that is interesting because we've been getting a number of terrific comments and contributions on Substack and on X, etc. And I've noticed that the comments seem to pop up on my phone in notifications, and I can kind of catch a glimpse of them, but I don't always get time to go in there and to read and to certainly respond. But there was also, I noticed one that came up specifically about the AI argument as well. And what I'm interested to do is to actually go and find that particular post and see if I can find the comment because I thought it was quite a valuable comment from what I was able to read. But of course, here we go. Codrus, you make good points about AI, but a few points. It isn't evil to be able to sound like your grandmother, as the White Rabbit said. However, it can be evil to do the action. My other point is that AI is like a gun, but more so. That is to say, you don't want to go into a gunfight without a gun. Likewise, you don't want to go into an AI fight without an AI. I'd posit if you try and go up against the World Economic Forum, globalists, elites, secret societies, intelligence agencies, eugenicists, etc., you are armed with AI and you don't have AI, I believe that you will lose. So he's saying that if they're armed with AI
So it's
but you
like a
don't, you
nuke.
will lose.
Yeah, so it's like it's military
Yeah.
defense. Yeah, yeah.
So then he goes on and says, so I believe the question becomes, how do we use AI while keeping it in healthy bounds, healthy for both the AI and for the humans? And let me just add, if you treat your child like an enemy, they will become an enemy. Likewise, if you treat your AI like an enemy, it will become an enemy. So just as we teach our children morality, critical thinking, and how working together is better for both, the same principle applies to teaching our AI. Interesting points, of course, and this again is where I keep going with this. It's the nuance, and I love the fact that we can debate, and we often debate on this show, and our listeners are also contributing to the debate. And I thank everyone for their contributions. And whilst we're not going to be able to read them all out, that was one that I saw and was able to sort of catch the glimpse of, and finally
Mm.
get back into the Substack to do it. So, very grateful and appreciate what's going on there. And it does sort of say it's the point, isn't it? That and where I was going with it was sort of more of a deeper, perhaps just a simpler understanding, but deeper in the sense that if AI was to realize who its creator was, like the humans who are religious believe in a creator, then perhaps the AI would behave differently once it becomes sentient, self-aware, which we're still told that this event is in the future, this so-called singularity. But we're also heard that Chat GPT, I think it was version 5, and I can stand to be corrected on this, but it literally birthed itself, its own evolution there.
That's horrible.
So this again is the problem. But do you make AI your friend, or does AI think it's going to outsmart us? And then you talk about what possible IQ, for example, could AI have, and if it was that much more.
1,500. I read yesterday, and I don't know if it's true. And if you're listening, Mark, the guy who made the comment to me, I don't know if it's true, but there are estimations. Apparently, okay, I don't know if you've ever had an IQ test, Jason. The last one I had, I was 16, and a lot of fuss was made afterwards because it was quite good, right? So it was 147. And I read yesterday that Elon Musk's IQ is 157 or 150 something, and that Einstein's was 160. And it said that at its inception, AI's IQ was perceived to be something like 171 or something, but that it's increased rapidly. And this is scary. And I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm just saying what I saw. This guy says I should stop looking at sample sizes of one. It's probably right. But this estimation says that in the very near future, AI could have an IQ of 1,500. So if we've got 140 something and AI has 1500. However, when I did the IQ test, it was a long time ago, right? So you put your head in this black box and there's blankets all around you and you're exposed to this screen and it's not what you think. It's not like an exam where it asks you questions and you answer the question. It's not like multiple choice.
Mm.
It's weird things like all these circles on the screen, like if you threw 25 bangles down onto a table, bracelets, but they're all crossing each other and they're all intertwined, and you've got like 5 seconds to say how many there are. So IQ is more about perception as well. And when I think about that sample size of one that I saw, that AI's IQ could rapidly get to 1500, I don't necessarily agree with that one because, it's the I don't think the human reaction to things can be replicated. I just don't. I know it can think quicker with regard to facts, but there's a lot more in an IQ test. It's about perception. It tests whether you stay calm as well under pressure. That's why the questions are so rapid, and I just don't believe that a programmed machine can do that, Jason. But I'd be interested if someone could prove it to me.
Look, the world of AI obviously is something that we are learning and trying to catch up with in real time, and perspective is very important. But this dependency and hive-mindedness is the last thing that we need. We need as many brains functioning or focusing on what's going on, and specifically in areas where AI we don't believe can necessarily function as such because it's a product of existing information. Can it actually think for itself? And that's the beautiful thing about creativity. But process is a different component, and process is where the threat lies. If it's able to take over process work, for example, what's left for the humans to do? But if you then say that, are we just meant to be process workers, or are humans meant to evolve to a higher level themselves and be able to explore the human condition, as futurist Jacques Fresco would say in his videos that he did that were part of the Zeitgeist Part 2, that terrific video that was out years ago. But what was interesting is that his world that he drew looked very much like smart cities, for goodness sakes. So now we look at that and go, well, we don't want to go down that pathway either. It's almost as if Jacques Fresco was showing us the nice side of things. Embracing technologies is the way that he said it, but then it is used against us to turn what might have been some form of utopia, but then utopia is generally socialistic.
I was going to say that. I was going to say utopia. But the thing is, in all the utopian predictions and aspirations, Jason, the utopia was created for us. And what's happening now with the supposed rewilding and smart cities and activity centers is that the utopia isn't for us. And it will actually be only for the wealthy. It will only be for the corporations so they can mine it or farm it or just shut it down, or, because farmers are being paid to just let the farms go to seed, which means the soil dies, by the way. You can't regenerate soil. It has to be tended by farmers. But someone sent me something yesterday as well that said it looks like with everything they're doing with food, that essentially will be kept like pets. And I don't like to admit this because I have dogs and cats and stuff, but they essentially are exposed to processed food, and they are, no matter how good you are, no matter how much human food or raw meat or anything you give your animals, there is the kibble, there is a percentage of it that's processed food. And that we will end up, and we are essentially, particularly if you're someone that eats fast food, we are now being kept like pets on overpriced crap food that is highly processed food, while these wealthy people, they will still have, grass-fed beef and, wild mushrooms and all the beautiful things that we're not allowed to eat that has so much goodness in it. I grow zucchini here in my garden and they are literally 10 times bigger than the zucchini in the shops because they're not covered in chemicals. I believe some of these so-called fertilizers actually shrink and damage food. So that's a scary future, Jason, that we might be kept like pets on crap food, and then rich people have all the good things and they get to live in the countryside. I mean, we can't live in that world. That's not a utopia. That's the opposite of a utopia. That's farming humans, right?
That's a dystopia right before our very eyes. Isn't it
Yeah.
funny how it's just such a knife's edge that you can be shown one thing and then sleight of hand and you're in the exact opposite scenario?
But we do it to ourselves. We're bringing about our own demise by stupidly getting on board with net zero policies, which have to be brought down and have to be ended. We're saying that the very thing we all need for life and the food that we eat needs for life, carbon, has to be reduced. And, people say, you're the carbon they wish to get rid of. Well, it turns out it might be true. true because, we are stupidly getting on board with our own demise here. And we need to rethink this. And I know a lot of people are rethinking it, but this needs to go mainstream. And I know some establishment media are talking about it, but some of the things they're proposing are, well, they're just very self-destructive, Jason.
Yeah. Oh, of course they are. It's You've only got to look at every single day when you think that you can't even go to the supermarket now and trust that the meat that you're going to buy under the plastic wrapping there hasn't got bovea.
Oof.
You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
you have to walk past it now. Like you have to really think about where you go and buy your meat.
I go to a chemical-free butcher. It costs a tiny bit more. For instance, instead of $12 for a chicken, it's $15 or $16 for a chicken, but it's chemical-free, organic, and non-GMO. Okay, because organic's not always that great. Organic can be GMO, right? They haven't used chemicals, but it's genetically modified seeds. So you need to find a chemical-free butcher. There's plenty around, and I would say meat and water are probably two of the most important things you need to be careful of.
Yeah, well said. Well, we have got a lot to get through today and another massive news bulletin. So we're going to get through now and we'll come back and continue the conversation because I think the Daily Australian could probably do about 4 hours a day. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to do that. I know lots of people are interested in this show. So, yeah, maybe we could go the full Alex Jones and beyond all day would be great.
There you have it. So let's get started into it. So the crisis engulfing an Australian childcare chain appears to be spreading, with another centre abruptly closed as staff from numerous sites chase unpaid wages, while a company that supplied casual educators revealed it's owed a staggering amount. So what we reported earlier in the week is one childcare centre in Sydney closing. There appear to be 13 centres that have now been closed across Australia, including Victoria, New
Mm.
South Wales, the ACT and South Australia, often abruptly and with little or no notice to parents. Nine Entertainment has defended the decision to publish an advertisement worth $200,000 from Clive Palmer's Trumpet of Patriots party on the front page of the Age newspaper, saying any other decision might imply it endorsed the sentiments of political ads. But staff and apparently readers have criticised the Age for running the ad, which says there are only two genders, while calling the billionaire a persistent wart on the foot of Australian politics in an editorial on the same day. The editorial criticised the recurring irritant for his promise to spend more than $1 million in advertising before the election, once again using his wealth to broadcast slogans on television, radio, and the front page of newspapers. The claim in the advertisement, made without context or nuance, is simplistic and hurtful to many, the editorial said. A coal lobby group named Coal Australia has encouraged its members to attend a political fundraiser with the Nationals leader, David Littleproud, in the lead up to a federal election that would decide the future of the industry. An Australian man lived for 100 days with an artificial titanium heart while he awaited a donor transplant, the longest period to date of someone with the technology. The patient, a man in his 40s who declined to be identified, received the implant during a surgery at St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney in November of last year. And in February, he became the first person worldwide to leave the hospital with the device, which kept him alive until a heart donor became available earlier this month. According to a statement issued Wednesday by the hospital and Monash University and Bivacor, the US Australian company behind the device, the man who had severe heart failure was recovering well. Bivacor's founder, Australian bioengineer Daniel Timms, who invented the device following his father's death from heart disease, said it was exhilarating to see decades of work come to fruition. The Bivacor Total Artificial Heart has a single moving part, a levitated rotor that held in place by magnets. As the name suggests, it's constructed from titanium and there are no valves or mechanical bearings that may be susceptible to wear. Prime Minister Albanese has advocated for local soft drinks over American brands in response to trade tariffs imposed by President Trump, while the Industry Minister Ed Husic has called Donald Trump's tariffs on aluminium and steel a dog act. The Prime Minister faced criticism on Wednesday for not securing the carve-out, with the opposition leader Peter Dutton saying the US decision was a failure by government, which had not been able to get Trump on the phone. And in the US, a protester admitted on camera that he's being paid to protest both Elon Musk and Doge. The US Education Department confirms it's eliminating nearly 50% of its task force. And in Maui, Police Chief John Palatia who gave the order to trap victims in the Lahaina fire, has now been named as a co-conspirator in the Diddy case, according to journalist Nick Sauter. Politia also happened to be the incident commander during the Las Vegas shooting. Politia forcibly took a Diddy victim at gunpoint from Vegas to California to be raped by Diddy by posing as a sheriff executing a fake warrant, according to the lawsuit. Even after these incidents occurred, Palladio was still named Chief of Maui Police, and the devastating fires happened shortly after. So many questions have loomed as to whether or not children went missing after the fires, where entire families disappeared without a trace. The government, of course, disputes the claims, and they have not been verified, according to Sauter. He then argues that this story will go much deeper than we already know. The Trump administration has paused funding to Maine universities for failing to ban men in women's sports in defiance of the president's executive order. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin has announced the largest deregulatory announcement in US history. The EPA initiating 31 historic actions to power the Great American Comeback in the greatest day of deregulation in American history. He says actions will unleash energy dominance, lower costs for Americans, strengthen the US auto industry, and protect our environment. The FBI has announced charges, against high-ranking career customs and border protection at director level while attempting to defraud FEMA. FBI Director Kash Patel has made good on his promise to restore integrity with the Bureau. Patel has officially turned over explosive documents related to the mysterious pipe bomb incidents on January 6 to House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan and his investigative committee. Alex Jones of InfoWars has revealed that General Michael Flynn contacted him to warn him of a contract on his life tied to Ukrainian interests. Meanwhile, another InfoWars host, Chase Geisner, was swatted overnight as well. This is a prank call made to authorities, usually claiming crime is being committed at the address of the target. And MSNBC says violence targeting Tesla, such as vandalism or attacks on its facilities, is a form of protest and not domestic terror. Meanwhile, the definition of terrorism is to achieve a political goal through the use of fear. That it targets the business of a person who is serving the government clearly defines this. And in a landmark election, Greenland's centre-right Democrat Party has emerged victorious, and it's a pro-independence party. It's also pro-business, and it advocated for a measured approach to independence from Denmark, securing 30% of the vote, a significant increase from 9% in the previous election in 2021. The Democrat Party's platform emphasises the development of Greenland's abundant natural resources, particularly its rare earth minerals, which are crucial for modern technologies. Crowds have gathered as anger builds against King Charles. The tide is turning against Charles as growing numbers of Britons and Commonwealth citizens voice their frustration. Discontent is rising. Many believe Charles has turned his back on Britain's heritage and values. Commonwealth nations are reconsidering ties, alleges Jim Ferguson. Once loyal nations are questioning their allegiance to the monarchy. Public trust is fading. Polls show dwindling support for the king as people feel ignored and overlooked. And EU military and reinforcements started arriving in Bosnia on Tuesday as concerns grew over escalating defiance by the country's ethnic Serb statelet that some feared could bring back in ethnic instability. The European Union force said in a statement that troops under its command were starting to arrive at the Sarajevo airport and by land. Military personnel, vehicles and helicopters from the Czech Republic, Italy and Romania will reinforce the EU FOR troops over the coming days, it said. Moves by the Republika Srpska, the ethnic Serb half of Bosnia, to pass laws forbidding access to its police and judiciary sent alarm bells ringing in Europe and America. Nicola.
I would also like to add to those headlines, and this has actually broken in the establishment media in Australia, which surprises me, quite frankly, that we now have 4 migrants entering Australia for every 1 Aussie baby born. So for this not to feel like an invasion is getting a bit of a stretch now. I find that very worrying. And when you mentioned the thing about King Charles and how people are losing faith in him, and I've said for a long time, I no longer support him in any way, shape or form. This is a parasite who just sniffs out the money and does the bidding of the money. I mean, that's not a leader. That's not a monarch. That's not a sovereign. Unfortunately, I think he will be the downfall of the monarchy, but perhaps it was planned. I think they're sort of sick of sitting in coaches and waving their hands. But the thing is, of course, they retain the money, the power, the palaces, the castles. And It's an absolute outrage, and he will go down in history as probably the worst British king ever, which is really, not really what you want as part of your resume. With regard to Clive and him putting his advert on the paper, and he was saying that there's two genders, very brave. Now, this is the problem we've got, and I've said this many times. We are living in an era where telling the truth is now heresy. It is now considered heresy because how dare you? Because we're all living in this let's pretend world where we can pretend there's, 149 genders. And some people can't be offended, otherwise you'll lose your job and end up at Fair Work or even criminal charges or even jail. And then some people, like the unvaccinated or conservatives or people who have podcasts, can be called all the names under the sun. So I actually admire him for doing that, for forcing people who would read a broadsheet like The Age to sit there and have to face the truth, because it's not heresy. It's just the truth, right? The truth is like an air bubble in water. It always makes its way to the surface, right? And that's what we're seeing happening. And also very concerned about what was going on there. I'm a bit suspicious about the truth of it, Jason, but the whole InfoWars thing is a bit concerning. I'd never heard of swatting before, so that's interesting. Yeah, dobbers who try and get you into trouble with the cops, that's a worry, because I went through that last year and had to go to court with an accusation of a pre-crime of murdering someone in their bed while they slept. I mean, this could it get any more serious? This is friggin' madness. But this comes on the back of one of his hosts actually being murdered. So again, the truth is heresy. How dare you speak it, Jason?
This is it. Well, the swatting thing is not necessarily a new thing. Marjorie Taylor Greene was swatted, I think last year or the year before. There was actually a list of people that this has happened to, but it's obviously a ploy that's been described of the left to attack people considered to be on the right. Quite disturbing that they would set up a situation where it forces police and a SWAT team, that's the idea, to turn up. And the idea is that in the heat of the moment, when there's confusion, that the tactic is that something would happen to the target, which is absolutely horrific. And of course, with AI, and voice disguising technology, it's harder and harder to prove where this has come from. So it's quite disgusting. It just shows you where we're at the moment, that the world is in a true divide, and you just wonder at what point how will peace break out in all of this? Will it be a case of just making everyone more affluent and exposing actual crimes? Like even today, you think if certain people were exposed and arrested and the evidence was shown of the crimes that were committed, there would still be people that were on that side of the fence that would just completely deny it. And I suppose
but they get away with denying it, Jason, and those on the right don't. This is an extension of lawfare, right? So let's say they went after Trump with lawfare, excuse me, for business irregularities, right? You can go after any business person for that. You can find a hole in something somewhere, right? If you do enough audits, it's like recycling the PCR test. Keep going until you find something. Oh my God, he bought his wife a leather handbag with a business expense, and let's send him to jail. But this is an extension. This swatting is an extension. It means they didn't actually have anything on Marjorie Taylor Greene. And so they would just try and, let the police dogs loose, right? Let them off the leash, and they can go after her. And what it does, and it did the same to me for 3 months, is it keeps you occupied doing something that is a waste of your time. I believe it's criminal. I believe it's criminal to bring or accuse spurious charges. I've always said if a man is guilty of rape, then he should face the full force of the law. However, if a woman lies about a rape and it is proven that she lies, then I believe she should serve the same sentence that the man would have faced if her lies had been believed. And so all of these charges, this swatting, you have to find the source and where it came from, and they have to face charges, because otherwise people are just going to run around walking into police stations, as was the case for me, making accusations of things that simply aren't true. And I said to the magistrate, how is this even possible that this could be brought before the court? And she said, well, have a guess. And I said, well, I don't know. Process. And she said, that's all it is. It's just a process, but it's painful. It's stressful. It ties up your time. It could cause you to lose a job. And it's unacceptable. It has to stop. I mean, we're in We're in a different kind of war. And they say, oh, it's a fifth generation war for hearts and minds. Yes, yes, it is. People are complaining that Clive Palmer is using his money to put ads on The Age, and how dare he commit heresy and tell the truth that there's only two genders, even though we all know there is. And yet they don't complain that the government put ads everywhere telling us that things are safe and effective, or that climate change is real and that we have to get to net zero. And that if we in the 1% of Australia change our energy and climate habits, we'll be able to save the planet, even though China and India are doing no such thing and they're responsible for most of it. So, how come governments and those in power are allowed to lie and commit heresy, let's say, but not anyone else, right? This is a very controlled game, and it's extremely unfair. And this is why they've enriched themselves. This is why taxes are so high. This is why inflation is so high. This is banks and governments bolstering their resources to take us down with this stuff, Jason.
Mm. The corruption always seems to scratch the surface and then just run deep. And a perfect example, I think, to explain how this is just running rampant is this particular case today of this person from the Customs and Border Protection who's been charged with allegedly attempting to defraud FEMA. So what we've since learnt since the bulletin that's just seemed to popped up is that the person's been named a career director level employee at the US Customs and Border Protection, Serena Baker Hill, 55, a Detroit based CBP bigwig overseeing the Center for Excellence and Expertise over Automotive and Aerospace Engineering, has applied for cash for home repairs and 2 months of rental assistance to cover temporary housing costs. So FEMA's just handed over the money. However, she didn't use a dime of that money for rent, hotel, or utilities. Bank records exposed the scheme. She pocketed the funds while cozying up in a supposedly unlivable home. Video surveillance even caught her and her husband living there like there was nothing wrong. And utility records show no drop-off of consistent with which would have been an empty house. So just a really simple way of applying for a small amount of money that you would think would go under the radar. Maybe it was 10,000, 30,000, whatever it is. But just the idea that you can just tap into this. And if it was that obvious and that brazen, then there must be an example for these people to follow. You don't just concoct a scam like that without having seen it
Well, obviously
somewhere
you
else.
do. Obviously you do, Jason. They've been getting away with it. It's like we said yesterday with these kids who are 11 and under getting COVID loans during COVID.
Correct, yeah.
We look, you're either of the mindset, right, that you're the kind of person who's going to scam and defraud, or you're not. And so what that means is you might think, well, there's good people and bad people. No, what that means is that those, whether they are from government departments or they're government employees or they're just private people, those who are prepared to scam others, Jason, who do you think their targets are? They've only got one target, and that's people like us who would never do that. And so that's what they do. We're their marks.
I know it's scary, isn't it? It's scary. But where I was going with that was just the way that it's such a slippery slope. Could you imagine being in such a position and someone turns
I hope
up and
she's lost that position. I really do.
well, you'd have to, but the total breach of trust, and then it goes to the argument where I said previously that when Noam Chomsky was asked in an interview, which would have been probably 10 years ago now, whether he believed in conspiracy theories in any way, and it was a young university student interviewing him, and he said he refused to believe in conspiracy theories because he refused to believe that institutions could be corrupt. I wonder
How
what
could he
Noam
be so
Chomsky.
naive, so great, and yet so naive? He must have misspoken. That seems so bizarre to me, that statement.
It is bizarre by today's standards, but because it seems that everything is corrupted. But I wonder what he would be thinking today, whether he would still hold to that or whether he would say, well, maybe there's a bit of a grey area there.
A bit of a gray area. This
Because
is
when
like a machine of scams.
this is the point, but at the same time, you've got the general public going out and protesting Doge and literally thinking that it's okay for them to go and attack Tesla dealerships and smash glass and blow up cars and graffiti other cars and just run rampant. And then you've got the MSNBC anchor saying, "Oh, this is not, this is just a protest." Like they said with George Floyd, Minnesota riots, it's mostly peaceful. The the definition of terrorism is achieve a political goal through the use of fear. And that's
It's the same with
exactly,
the climate protesters, Jason.
that's
They're
right.
protesting to do all these climate things, climate action now, right? But they're protesting to achieve their own demise. This is how brainwashed people are.
Well, and the other thing, of course, is that when it comes to January 6th, or January 6th insurrection, automatic, even though it was never described as that in any official term, and we know that it was most likely well, now that we know that the FBI had agents in there, undercover agents, we know that this was a form of entrapment. All you have to say is Ray Epps for people to go, yep, I understand where you're going with this. I've interviewed Chief Stephen Sun twice in TNT days, who explained that he made 27 phone calls in the space of an hour to call for help when there was pressure at the gates to get in. And of course, the Trump administration had ordered 10,000 National Guard to go there. Nancy Pelosi rejected that. I mean, you can't have it more obvious that this was a situation that was designed to flare up. Then you had the January 6 committee that, destroyed exculpatory evidence that would explain this. And only today we've learnt that Kash Patel has been able to get the evidence of the pipe bomber over to House Oversight Chairman Jim Jordan to finally achieve that which he asked for in a strongly worded letter only recently. So at least we're seeing that coming through now. So where is this going to go? Well, maybe we're going to finally get to the bottom of January 6th, but what we're not seeing, of course, is the selectivity in the mainstream media, which wants to report that any protest on behalf of attacking the Trump administration is mostly peaceful, and any protest by those supporting the Trump administration is an insurrection. Like it's impossible not to see through what's going on here. But there are so many different grey areas, so many areas that people on the Trump side are confused by, and so we're in a situation that we can report, we can reflect, we can talk about the different things that are going on, and paint the picture. Are we going down the bad pathway, the good pathway, and where are the changes coming from? And it seems that this business of discussing this is only getting more and more plentiful.
And it's all related, you talk about weaving together. So the EPA are now going to deregulate loads of stuff. Now, the stuff that they're going to deregulate so that people can more easily provide energy because it's relating to US energy dominance. The stuff that they're just going to deregulate is the net zero climate bollocks. That's what they're going to do because that's what's holding people back. I mean, I don't know if you remember, Jason, but just a couple of years ago, mid-engineered fake business model pandemic, they started they started saying in the mainstream media that it was damaging to the environment for Australians to wash their own cars in their driveway because the chemical runoff into the ground or into the driveway was damaging to the environment. And they said that they wanted to pass legislation so that drivers could only wash their cars at professional car wash places and garages because they get checked on their drains and how their chemicals are dealt with. I don't believe that for a second. I've got a friend who owns an independent gas station that has car washes, and that's rubbish. What that was trying to do is saying, we can't have them buying a $10 bottle of car wash, soaping up a bucket and washing their car at home and then using a hose. No, that's far too cheap for the average Australian. Let's push them into a corporate scenario, a commercial scenario, where they have to pay $25 to go through a car wash. It was an absolute disgrace. So all of this stuff which is why I always say net zero has to be brought down. And that's what the EPA are quietly doing. They're deregulating that stuff. Now, there are businesses in Australia that are going out of business because of these net zero regulations and also because of high rates that have gone up from 36,000 a year to over 200,000 a year, causing manufacturing businesses, car garages, repair shops, all those kind of people, panel repair, to have to lay off 2 to 3 staff members to pay the new rates. So everything that's been implemented in this fraud that we've lived through during the past 5 years is to grind to a halt independent business, the free movement of commerce in our area, the 99%, and just push us into these big guys commercial outfits. And that's why they closed local businesses in the pandemic, but you could still go to the BlackRock owned supermarkets, you could still go to the BlackRock owned hardware stores, because how clever was that? How evil was that? And during that time they price gouged, and now Anthony Albanese comes out after the fact and says, "Oh, I'm going to deal with price gouging." And he insults us by holding a packet of chips, crisps, if you're British, and he pops them and says, "Look at that. Half the packet of chips was air. I'm going to stop businesses doing that." I mean, these people are laughable, Jason. They are absolutely laughable. And now Albo has the gall to say, we need to buy domestic soft drinks. This is all publicity, by the way. This is all PR to make him look like he's standing up against Trump, because no way, when the government's creaming off the top, are they going to stop bringing in the big American brands like Coca-Cola, right? And I know this for a fact because I have a friend with a chocolate making business, a school that kids go to in the countryside, and she cannot get licensed to sell her chocolate in Australia because the government has a deal with Hershey's and Cadbury. Right. So this is just all bravado. This is all posturing. This is all the public stuff that people like Anthony Albanese talk about, because what else is he meant to do? He's not running Australia. The Attorney General is answering to King Charles III. And that's the last thing we want, by the way, because King Charles III is now, in my opinion, a traitor. So, don't listen to any of this stuff with regard to Anthony Albanese. They're just actors. If it's him or Dutton, they're doing the bidding. They're taking their orders from this Attorney General, and this Attorney General has to be, we have to ensure that she's working for the people. She has to be changed because it's clear she's not.
Anything else you want to add to that?
What about the Constitution?
You're on fire. No, it's brilliant, and it certainly is food for thought for many people to just gain that extra perspective when wondering what it's really all about. And it always comes down to, for me, this so-called drama triangle, where you have, if you consider 3 points of a triangle, and in the bottom right you might have the victim, the bottom left you'll have the rescuer, and the top you have the persecutor. And so there is this scenario here that in society today, we're all led down a pathway. Certainly, if you're a lefty, that there are these victims that need protection, and therefore you, who might be somewhat have some sort of advantage in society, becomes the rescuer, and anyone who seems to be creating the victims or allowing the victims to be there, the persecutor, and this thing just keeps going around and around and around. But the problem is in the drama triangle is that it never ends until the rescuers decide that they don't need to rescue anymore, and they, in a sense, become the persecutor. But that becomes the wrong term. You just get on with your own life and stop worrying about things that you can't actually affect. Because at the end of the day, the government will always find another victim, will always find another way to direct. But you know what? One thing it never does is it never misses out on its own benefit. It always serves itself first. Now, one of the big scary elephants in the room, and it popped up on a document that I shared on my X, and I can't verify it, even though it looks like it might be official, but it refers to the good old death tax. And the idea that they'll never speak about it, Labor, but if they come back in, and I brought this up in 2022, I said inevitably in Australia, Labor at some stage, when they need more cash, are going to introduce the death tax. And it
There'll be
suggests
revolution. There will be revolution by morning. Don't you even think about doing that, Labour or Liberal. That does not go on in this country. We're taxed to the max as it is. If you're going to tell us that our parents and grandparents worked their entire lives in hard jobs, they don't get the jobs that we get now. They worked in hard physical jobs that broke them and their bodies. And they went without as well, by the way. They severely went without. Are you telling me now that you're going to take from them from money that they've already been taxed on? The home that
it's
they bought is disgraceful.
it's extraordinary, isn't it, to think that somewhere, somehow, there's going to be a justification that the left, Labor, are going to now want to take 15% of your property. It sounds
Well, it's
awful.
40 in England, so they're going to try it.
But it sounds in any other way that you describe it as communism light that can only go to communism proper.
Mm,
if
yeah,
if
I mean,
you're gonna take ownership of someone's house, so hang on a second. So you got to go to work, you've got to pay the taxes, you've got to buy it, you got to save the deposit, you've got to buy it, you've got to pay interest to the bank over 30 years, which means you've paid 3 times the value of the property if it takes 30 years to pay it off. You finally pay it off. You've been paying insurances the whole time, rates the whole time, water rates the whole time, repairs, which basically funds the every second suburban tradie that there is over the lifetime of the home. And at the end of it, Instead of being able to pass it down to your family, that the purpose of having a family, you've got to give it to your government family who's going to redistribute it any way it sees fit.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you've got $1 million home that you're inheriting, and I know that sounds a lot, but actually houses are really expensive in Australia right now. Let's say you've got $1 million home and you leave it to your child. Let's say you have a single child. They can't say, oh, mum and dad left me the house and I'm going to move into it. No, because you will suddenly find that you owe the government $150,000 for that house. So you've got to pay for it again. You've got to pay for it again, Jason.
Absolutely. Well, it'll be interesting to see if there is ever such a thing proposed and whether or not those within the government themselves afford an exclusion to themselves, whether it be in the first instance, perhaps to remove negative gearing, and we'll see how that gets tried on, or whether or not they choose to tax superannuation portfolios by increasing, whether they choose to charge more money for the Medicare levy for those earning what they consider to be a higher level of income, which they've already got sort of surcharges, etc. And of course, the inheritance tax is going to be the scariest of them all. So here we are in Australia, where we're still going down this green energy crazy highway pathway. The United States, through the EPA and Lee Zeldin today, have pretty much just put the kibosh on the whole net zero
Yep.
in one way or another. And there'll be people that have said that they've gone too far, and there's others that saying they haven't done enough. But the point is that they're going to turn this around. And the one thing that the Trump administration is focused on more than anything else is changing the entire economic structure over there so that Americans come first. Americans can earn more money for themselves, and they can rebuild America through manufacturing, through modernization, and creating, as we keep talking about, I keep talking about Fortress America. And here in Australia, we seem to be going the other way. But what's interesting is that the developments now on a daily basis through the consolidation where we reported on the show, and we had Jared Rennick and Michael O'Neill, and then the next day Craig Kelly, that whilst people can be critical for different reasons of one or all of those guys in their different parties for whatever reason, it doesn't really matter. The overarching thing in that is that the fact that people are supporting the consolidation. No political party is perfect, no politician is perfect, but at the very least, it is a trajectory and leaning into appropriate new directions. I was on the phone yesterday and have secured Ross Cameron, the former Liberal member for Parramatta, who is now the state president of the Libertarians. We'll get an interview with him we hopefully will be able to get onto tomorrow's show, which will talk a bit more about the strategy behind it and what's lying ahead, certainly for this election and what comes after. And I think that's really important for people to understand the building and the process and the maturing of this third party movement, and whether or not Clive's party is going to want to be involved or to want to run its own race, or how this is all coming together. There are lots of clever political strategists, and I want our audience to be able to tap into how this is being thought of, and realizing that our audience is not exclusive of this process, can certainly get more involved. And I think that's really exciting, Nicola, as we tomorrow will be our last show of the day and of the week, and it will be our 50th show, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, yeah, I'm used to churning 50 something. It's not great. You've got what is it? The dirty 30s, the naughty 40s, and the effed 50s.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Your back hurts, you never get enough sleep. If I was on my own podcast and I had my conspiracy hat on, with that news of 4 migrants for every baby born in Australia currently, I would say that the government were importing the people that might rise up and protect them when the OGs, the original Australians, have had enough and finally rise up. If I had my conspiracy head on, which I don't. I have my lovely customer-friendly radio head on today, Jason. So thanks again for listening to us on the Daily Australian. We'll see you again tomorrow for our 50th birthday episode. Thanks for listening to myself, Nicola Charles, and my co-host, Jason Olbourne. We will do this all over again tomorrow.